I wanted to move on to Lane Johnson. I'm going to read you this about Lane Johnson. 2-time Super Bowl winner, 2-time first team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, has been to 3 Super Bowls and has won 2 of them. Right tackle. When you look at a resume like that and you see the resumes that you look at for all the great offensive tackles that you have looked at to go and be enshrined in the Hall of Fame, is Lane Johnson a Hall of Fame player to you, in your opinion?
I think he probably is. I don't know that he'll get in. I think he'll get certainly tremendous support.
With two PED hits to his career.
And I know you asked me about that a couple of weeks ago, I think, in terms of will that be a strike against him? And when you talk about winning, I think I mentioned this then. I probably should have figured that you might ask me about it again, and I'd get the numbers. But I remember noticing it, I don't remember if it was 4 or 5 years ago, when he missed some games in a season for the Eagles.
It's and all still of a sudden that way.
And they weren't winning. I mean, if you look at you talk about winning, you talk about one-loss record, and when he plays for that team, they win most of their games. And the other point about the Eagles, when you were talking there with Xander, is that with all the different things that you mentioned being most of the time a running team and all those things, they also had one of the best offensive line coaches for a long, long time who won't be there this year. And it's going to be interesting to see, how they do. I mean, heck, Dante Scarnecchia in New England through all that winning. I mean, he survived, I don't know how many head coaches in New England coaching that offensive line for 30 plus years. And then there was a period of time, Dan, where he retired. He retired from the Patriots. They were still good. The division wasn't.
Was that in a 10-year gap that he wasn't there?
Yeah. For part of not all of it, but part of it. Yeah. And then when he came back, boom, all of a sudden, I think I'm right on this. They went to the Super Bowl again. And so those offensive line coaches, I think, and those are the ones who don't get talked about a lot, but the offensive line coaches, you can make a long, long list of guys that I think are Hall of Fame worthy, but it's almost impossible, not almost impossible, it basically is impossible to get an assistant coach in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And thus the Hall of Fame created these awards of excellence, which awards assistant coaches. They don't get a bust. They don't get the weekend. They don't get to do a speech, at least in front of the whole world, basically. But the Hall of Fame at least awards those guys because it's hard enough to get head coaches in, the quality, the quality and deserving ones, much less assistant coaches. And there's a lot of great ones, offensive line, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, and they're just basically don't even get any consideration. And I've always thought that that's an issue with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, just generally.
Here's the numbers. Lane Johnson's not in. It's 18-27. When he's playing for the Eagles during his time, they've won 110 games and lost 57 and 1. 110 and 57 and 1 when Lane's on the field. When Lane's not on the field, the Eagles are 18-27.
There we go.
Does that take – do you look at something like that?
Yeah. I definitely do. Definitely do. And there again, you don't want to say that he was totally responsible, but what he meant to that team and on that offensive line, I mean, we're all enamored overall in football with the quarterback and with the skill players and all those guys. But you can have all the skill guys in the world, but if your offensive line can't block anybody, you're not going to have much consistency on offense. I remember when Andy Reid, when they were in the Super Bowl, was in fact, I think it was the game against the Eagles. And someone asked him about Howie Roseman, and he said, the thing about Howie that I always respected is he knew where games were won and lost, and that's in the trenches on the offensive and defensive lines. And the offensive line, especially if you don't have that line, then you have very little chance of having consistency on offense. You'll tease and you'll make plays. It's not like you'll never make a play, but third down, red zone, fourth quarter, things like that, that's where issues on the offensive line really rear its ugly head. And then what happened in that Super Bowl? They went out there, with two backups playing tackle, and they just got their head handed to them by the Eagles. And so, Josh Sweat dominated the game, Milton Williams and Jalen Carter. And that's the interesting thing. Jalen Carter didn't get the sacks, but he was double and triple teamed in that game. And that just opened things up for those other pass rushers who just made it a miserable afternoon for Patrick Mahomes, which he also experienced in the pandemic season with when they got to the Super Bowl against the Bucs, and they were also playing backups at tackle, and he was just under siege the entire game, and the Patriots won running away. So it's kind of always forgotten about offensive lines when they don't do their job. And I have a term I call it collective amnesia. You know, before the season, everybody talks about a team's line. Oh, they better improve the line. They better do this. They better do that. And then all of a sudden, whether it's for injury, whether they're not very good, instability, whatever it might be, if all of a sudden the offense isn't playing well, does anybody talk about the offensive line? No. They blame the quarterback, blame the play caller, or whatever it is. So they have collective amnesia about what they were saying about the offensive line before the season started. And I'll give you the Bears as a great example last year, Dan. Last season, all anybody was talking about, oh, the genius Ben Johnson, oh, and Caleb Williams pulling rabbits out of his hat and winning games, come from behind. But their running game was awfully good last season, which enabled them to do a lot of the things they did. And I would watch a game on national TV, especially, and I'd hear him waxing euphoric over Johnson and Caleb and all these guys. And I never heard him say, well, of course, you got to give credit to that offensive line, because in the offseason last year, the Bears went out and spent big money on 3 interior linemen. Guys that a lot of times people don't talk about. 2 guards in the center. Traded for 2 and signed 1 as an unrestricted free agent. And they just solidified that inner core of that offensive line and enabled the Bears to do a lot of the things they did last season. And yet I hardly ever heard people talk about that.
Man, great stuff here. A couple more here for you, Howard. What do you make of the NFL finally dissing the Pro Bowl? I mean, the Pro Bowl used to be something that was revered, and I got one of the greatest picture of all time. I went to Hawaii when I was in the league at the time, and I got a picture of Reggie and Jerome and Clyde Simmons and all those guys that made it to that Pro Bowl in Hawaii. It used to be really a great thing. They knocked that stadium down too, by the way. Now I guess they're going to select 88 players to the list of making the Pro Bowl. I think this is a better thing, because now you're not going to have the alternatives. And now, doesn't this enhance now being named to that team better than what it's been over the last 5 years? To me, it looks like it matters. The game wasn't really important.
No.
Being named to that team was important.
Exactly. And being named to it, that hasn't changed what has happened over the last few years. The one thing that disappointed me a little bit is they didn't explain it very well, because I had to ask a few questions, because they said, well, now we're just going to honor the 88 best players in the NFL, obviously, at their positions. Well, I'm thinking to myself, does this mean they're just going to have open voting and not by conference? And I was told, no, it's going to be 44 in the AFC and 44 in the NFC, like it has normally been. But that doesn't mean you're getting the best, because if you have 6 quarterbacks, right, 3 on AFC, 3 NFC, there might be that third quarterback in one of the conferences might not be better or as good as that year than the guy who didn't make it in the other conference, because they can only take 3. So I'd more like to see it do all 88. And then the other thing I thought of, why not just honor the all pros, right? That's really the best, because you have 1 quarterback on the all pro team, right? You have 1 running back. And the other part, Dan, is you were referencing it about right tackles. The Pro Bowl doesn't delineate. I mean, you can have tackles and they can all be left tackles, right? But in the Pro Bowl, you have to vote for specific positions. Left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard. You have to vote for those specific guys.